In this video, we are talking about the war between Disney and DeSantis. It is heating up over there at Reedy Creek. We're going to break all the new updates down in this episode of OG55. Welcome aboard to another episode of OG55. I am joined today by Dr. Drizzle, VashSky, host of the Freshly Squeezed show here on the channel. Dre, welcome back, sir.
And I'm happy to be back. You are far too kind, Dr. Interesting.
Mix it up a little bit,
Mix it up a little bit. Yeah, I get it. Well, thank you so much for having me on. This is it's gonna be a banger of a show here. We got a lot of stuff to get to, so I will quickly. Let's see if I have that drop here. Oh, come on.
You may dispense with the pleasantries.
That's the one. That's the one. I'll dispense with the pleasantries real fast. If you guys want to find me, you can go ahead and do so right down there at VashSky. Just go ahead and type it in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Waysense McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there on Twitter. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be in the channel you're watching right now at OrangeGo55 with my show there, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
I think that will be most relevant today as we talk about the ongoing saga of the RCID.
Yes, absolutely. That's basically the theme of this video, is altering the deal. All right, it's absolutely insane. I wanted, before we dive into the meat and potatoes, I made a tweet yesterday. I want to kind of address that tweet because I think a lot of people are sort of misinterpreting what I was trying to convey here, which is, I understand it's Twitter. Only so many characters, So I'm gonna dive into this and then kind of explain what I meant by it, and then we're gonna dive into the meat and potatoes of this Reedy Creek stuff. So yesterday I said, well, the original tweet was maybe Disney should disinvest from Florida. If they are not wanted, why should they bring in money for the state? They can do that somewhere where they are appreciated. That was from one of the 44. Okay, so I quote retweeted that. I said, I think a pullback should happen, to be honest. Disney and Bob Iger could cite, due to the hostile business environment, it's no longer feasible to pump billions into the area, and those funds will be redirected to other resorts while they wait for DeSantis to term out. Now, a lot of people interpret this as like trying to be like almost like mean-spirited to Florida, right? Like I'm trying to hurt Florida somehow. And have it benefit my home resort, Disneyland Resort. Farthest thing from the truth. Look, this is the thing when it comes to these kind of deals, right? Especially when you're dealing with a figure like Ron DeSantis, sure. Disney needs to look at what they have as leverage, okay? And what Disney has as leverage is jobs, economic engine, yada yada yada. So when you have a Ron DeSantis basically going after Disney and Disney saying, yeah, we're still going to invest $17 billion, what's Ron DeSantis's incentive to back off? There is none. He's getting the best of all of it. He can go and browbeat Disney till the cows come home for his base, and then he'll still get $17 billion from Disney invested into the resort and bring all that tourism dollars in. He's not losing at all, right? Sure. When that happens. So what do you do if you're Disney? Well, you take away a little bit of that, you take away a little bit of what he's benefiting from. And what Disney can control is how much they invest into Walt Disney World, right? So by saying, if Disney were to make an announcement, hey, look, you know what? We're not giving up on Florida. We're not moving the resort. Okay, it's not feasible. But what we are going to do is we're going to pull back on investment. We're not going to let the resort rot necessarily, but we're going to maybe not put $17 billion in there. We're going to hold off for a few years on investing. What that does is it starts to set alarm bells off for people like Ron DeSantis and the politicians of that state. They don't want that. They want they want Disney's tourism dollars, right? They want that investment. They want people going into the state. So if you take that away, then you start to make DeSantis worried, and you put him in a position where he's more willing to negotiate or back off, because you're not giving him what he wants. And that's all I'm saying. I think that it would benefit Disney and their position if they were to withhold some of that. It's called, in business, sometimes you have to do that. I know as fans, we you see that and go, well, I want the 17 billion. I get that. I want the 17 billion to go into Florida. I want them to build all these e-tickets and crazy lands and do amazing things. But in this is a war right now against Ron DeSantis. Disney's got to play ball here, right? They got to play ball, and the only way that they're going to win is if they have some leverage and kind of can pull back a little bit. And that's all I was trying to say here. And really, to be honest, they don't even have to really follow through. Like, look. The announcement, the headline alone is enough to fracture, in my opinion, Ron DeSantis' support with this war on Disney. Because you're going to have people in the Republican circles who are like, wait a minute, like now it's really affecting jobs, economic growth. This was our big selling point in Florida, was bringing this stuff in during the pandemic. And now Disney's threatening to pull back. We can't have this. It creates strife within Republican circles, and that means big problems for Ron DeSantis. I think it's a very smart idea for Disney to make this announcement and create an issue for Ron. And when you make this announcement, you tell everybody, all the trades, CNBC, everybody out there, you tell them the reason we are de-investing right now and pulling back is because of this situation. I think it would be huge for Disney, give them a shitload of leverage. So I'm not doing it to hurt Florida. I'm doing it to help Florida long term, because if they don't do something like this, we might get stuck with a crappy deal from this board. That's all I was trying to say on that. But Dre, do you have any comments, or do you agree, disagree in terms of the leverage factor going into this? Should Disney be, here's the thing. It's like going into a store, right? Or a restaurant and having shitty customer service and telling the manager, you know what, this place sucks. I got crappy service. Your waiter gave me attitude, but I'll come back tomorrow and spend even more.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to work.
A positive reinforcement in that scenario, probably not a good idea, right? The carrot and the stick approach, which, by the way, could actually have taken place already with that proclamation of $17 billion. When was the last time you heard, OG? When was the last time you heard the company talk about anything at all relating to their future investment in a property like Walt Disney World for the next 10 years? We've never heard of that from the company, unless it's a project that's been greenlit and it's like, oh, well, this is going to cost $1.5 billion. It's going to add 3,000 jobs. We've heard that kind of stuff before. The reimagining of a DCA, for example, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and so forth, right? I've been covering the company for a long time. I have never seen a forward-looking statement like that where it's like, hey, we plan on spending $17 billion over the next 10 years in this property. Never heard that before. Why do you think Bob Iger would have included that? Carrot and the stick, right? He's telling you, hey, this is the amount of money we could spend, but man, it all is really dependent on how this whole situation with the RCID, now the CFTOD, actually works out there. So I think that's what's kind of going on here. And it's interesting. You're not the only one that actually feels this way. We'll go over a certain ex-president's comments regarding that specific issue later on here in this video. But I want to go ahead and bring something to light right now on the eve of that, or just following the first one of the first official meetings of the RCID, the new board, or the CFTOD, Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Yeah, that's it, right? Where they actually discussed the agenda and so forth and what they're planning to do with the district, which we will get into. North Carolina actually, they came out with this. Lawmakers propose bill to bring the theme park to the state. Walt Disney World coming to North Carolina? North Carolina lawmakers filed a bill called, quote, Mickey's Freedom Restoration Act, to bring the Walt Disney Company theme park to the state. So I think that this was a little fun here.
Well, and here's the thing. I appreciate North Carolina's enthusiasm, to say the least, on this, right?
Yeah.
But the problem I have with these kind of articles, these kind of proposals, is that people focus on the ridiculousness of it, right? Moving Walt Disney World. So now every quote retweet or every response to this article is about, oh, look at this, these idiots think they can move Walt Disney World, which is true. I wish they wouldn't have done. I wish they would have said, hey, come here and build a new park. Then you're cooking with gas. Then you're making DeSantis nervous, because now it's like, oh shit, Disney might actually invest somewhere else. And that takes funds away from, like I just mentioned, that takes monies away from putting it into Florida.
Sure.
But when they word it like this, move Walt Disney World to North Carolina, people just laugh, because it's like the Texas rumor, that they build a new park. Universal's doing that. Universal's building a brand new kiddie park in Frisco, Texas. Build another resort somewhere in the States and mitigate the what's the word for it? The control DeSantis has over Disney's park division by having more resorts. The more parks, the more theme park stuff we have, the less of an impact a DeSantis has, because now Walt Disney World percentage wise plays a lesser role in that overall pie,
Well, I can tell you, I mean, North Carolina, I don't think so.
Exactly.
It's probably not going to happen. Well, it'd be more likely that South Carolina would be the location chosen, only because they actually have a resort there right now in the form of, I believe, the Hilton Head Resort is there, the DVC resort there. Yeah. It's one of those rare ones that isn't connected to a theme park property, because financial ties in the state and so forth that already exist there, but it's very, very unlikely. However, where they could invest, and where Bob Iger has actually said they could invest, and, well, what did the company do this week? Well, within the last week, I should say. Well, they had a coffee and donuts session over there in Anaheim for Disneyland Forward. Well, that's some interesting timing there on the eve of some big developments regarding the RCID situation. They are recommitting to Anaheim, and this is really kind of interesting. Robert Niles writes, quote, why Disney's real community of tomorrow is in Anaheim. And they, Niles himself does make the connection right here. Says right here, let's see, in both cases, Disney could get the land flexibility it wants in ways that actually create better situations for the resort's neighbors than they have now. 13 months of lockdown should have banished any fantasy that Anaheim and its residents would be better off without the Disneyland Resort. That is correct. Given that Disneyland is not going anywhere, how will Disney and its neighbors work together to create a situation that works better for all? Good neighbors can and should be tough, but the proper response to being pushed by a powerful organization is to organize, push back, and stand for a better deal. Contrast the Disneyland Forward process with the ongoing farce in Central Florida, where Disney enjoyed decades of nearly unchallenged authority over Walt Disney World and now faces a state government that wishes to control Disney for ideological purposes. Not ideological, political. Walt Disney bought all of that land outside Orlando to build an experimental pro-deck community, a model for cities around the world. How ironic, then, that the better model for a functioning community would be found back at home of its original theme park in Anaheim. So people are already starting to make the connections between, wait a minute, all this stuff going on out here, Disney's investing, or at least attempting to commit to invest a lot over here. Are these things connected? I think they are.
Well, yes. And the timing on that Disneyland Forward thing is not by accident. We heard Bob Iger, mention in, I believe it was the quarterly earnings, maybe it was the annual shareholder meeting. I don't really remember, to be honest. It was one of those where he mentioned there's opportunities in California that people aren't aware of. And now you're starting to see the Disneyland Forward stuff kind of ramp up again with that coffee event the other day that we did a video on. And that's not a coincidence. Look, it's this Disneyland Forward thing will be a centerpiece, I think, for the war against Ron DeSantis, because Disney's gonna want to do is they want to get something passed in Anaheim, which is Disneyland Forward, so they can turn around and say, look, you know what? We're Disney. Hey, we're not unreasonable, right? We can work with local governments when they're reasonable, when they act like adults. It's just this Ron DeSantis over here. He's not an adult. He's not stable. That's why we can't work with him. Look, we do it all the time with Anaheim. We're all good. We got Disneyland Forward push. What's Ron DeSantis's problem? That's the angle I think they're going with here.
Oh, absolutely. And this was illustrated quite beautifully by Well, one of Time's most influential people for 2023, is that right? Bob Iger, yeah, cover of the magazine right there. But they actually had an interview portion of it, and I thought his interview here was fascinating. And this will start us off on our journey across what has actually happened over the last week here. Interviewer says, "I cannot let this interview finish without asking you about the situation in Florida. Did you checkmate Ron DeSantis?" And I believe, Iger says this: Disney World opened just over 50 years ago. It was the vision and the dream of Walt Disney, probably the most ambitious thing he ever did, turning swampland in Central Florida into a business that employs over 75,000 people, that is visited by tens of millions of people every year, that is a major tourist destination in the United States and for the state of Florida. That creates huge value for our company and its employees and for the state of Florida itself. Our sole goal in Florida is to continue creating that value for all those constituencies. All we want is a relationship with the state that enables us to continue to do that. We have the wherewithal, and we have the desire to continue to invest there to grow that business so that we can hire more people, so that we can increase our attendance, and so that we can basically increase more value for Walt Disney, the Walt Disney Company, and for the state of Florida. It's really that simple. But he went on and elaborated on this point here. He says this, the interviewer: "Usually, you're very much a let's sit down and get past our differences kind of guy. I would argue, but okay. And much less a let's go to the mattresses guy. Is there no trying to meet with the governor?" And Iger says this: "I do not view this as a going to mattresses situation for us. If the governor of Florida wants to meet with me to discuss all of this, of course, I would be glad to do that. You know, I'm one that typically has respected our elected officials and the responsibility that they have, and there would be no reason why I wouldn't do that here." So it's quite interesting, right? It's like, oh, hey, we're civil about this. We're the adults that want to invest in Florida right here. It's the governor's problem, and to that end, my door is wide open. If the governor ever wants to go ahead and walk through it, I am glad to sit down and talk to our, who I would typically respect as our elected officials. So there's definitely some back and forth here that's really, really interesting. But as you'll see in a moment, is it confidence or is it hubris? We'll have you decide by the end of this video.
Yeah. And this is interesting. This is definitely a PR move. Like, I can't really say definitively if he means it or not, because I just don't know. Like, if Ron DeSantis gave him a call and said, let's work something out, I don't know. I would be hard pressed to think that Iger would decline necessarily.
Sure.
But at the same time, this is definitely for, like you said, Ray, like it's definitely for like, hey, we're the adults in the room. This guy's a maniac over there in Florida. He's not willing to sit down with anybody. We're trying over here. Doors open, right. And it's kind of like, see, this is the thing with Bob Iger is he is a master salesman, and you're seeing him at work right now with this stuff, and you're seeing it all over the place with the trades. When DeSantis joked about the prison, you saw it all over the media, not by accident. Iger has a lot of pull, and he's using it.
He sure does. And one of the ways that the company has pull right here relates to our next story that actually happened. Reedy Creek determines no records exist for Florida Attorney General's probe into Disney's power agreements. I guess following the inquiry from some of the officials over there at the executive branch in Florida, they put in a request, as we, I think, covered on this show, saying, hey, if you have anything relating to this, to these developer agreements or covenants, please go ahead and turn those over. And it's like, nope, don't have anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Interesting, because they did have something. They just didn't turn it over, which we'll go over into in just a moment here. But then it was unveiled that the DeSantis' handpicked Reedy Creek board can use blatant power grab. That's interesting. Blog Mickey introduces the Superior Authority Amendment.
There's no mincing words for the Blog Mickey. You know what side Blog Mickey's on, which is fine. There's no problem with that. But I'm just saying, it's the headline is great.
Which is very interesting because, as Ron DeSantis himself pointed out, Blog Mickey is one of those media commentators, let's say, or media outlets that has been very critical of the RCID in the past, which is very, very interesting. Actually, a lot of these media organizations were very critical of the RCID, including but not limited to the Orlando Sentinel. And now their tune has changed. DeSantis has some thoughts as to why that might be. And to be honest, I'm sympathetic with that view right there. But what it says right here regarding the superior authority section to the RCID land development regulations, it says this: the proposed new section would give the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District authority over not only district planning and regulations, but also those of the cities of Lake Buena Vista and Bay Lake. The new section, which would be section 7-20.13 of the RCID land development regulations, ensures that the district has absolute authority over, quote, the reviewing, processing, evaluating, commenting on, and approving with conditions or denying applications for development orders throughout the district, including within the jurisdictional limits of the cities of Lake Buena Vista and the cities of Bay Lake. So, that's a very kind of interesting thing right there. We'll
now,
have to see. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say real quick before I move on. I think, like you mentioned, like Blog Mickey, and I don't know DeSantis's theory on this, and we'll hear him out. We'll hear him out, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is like I think a lot of people, and you've mentioned this before on the show, were kind of weary of this deal, this special deal that Disney has had for 50 years, and a lot of people were not adverse to maybe changing it, maybe looking at it again with fresh eyes and addressing it again.
Correct.
I think the problem a lot of people have, though, is not that they're against maybe Reedy Creek evolving. I think the problem they have, and this is really the issue that I have mostly too, is that it's not coming from a place of like the governor gets in there and he's like, you know what, this thing has been in here for 50 years. I think we can do better. I think it's antiquated and I think we should readdress it, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of come at it from like this is something that's been on my mind for years before I even ran for public office, and I want to tackle this issue. If it came from an organic place like that, where you have a governor, he or she, whatever, that wants to come in here and revisit this, I'm on board with that. My issue is that it came in out of vengeful. This is like Disney pissed me off, so now we're gonna go in there and do this as a punishment. From day one, that's been my biggest issue, is that it's being used as a punishment. And I think when you go at it, if that's your starting place for this, it's just not a good place to start from. If it came from this place of like, this needs to be readdressed because I feel like it's outdated, that's fine. And I think they could have got somewhere with that. Yeah. This method, though, all this is going to lead to is animosity and lawsuits. I think,
and this method, OG, we have some, we mutually have some problems on DeSantis' methodology regarding this entire thing right here. That's for sure. We might differ on how these things can be solved, but this methodology in particular, like you said, has been messy. It has been it has been a sore spot for DeSantis, I would say. Again, this was supposed to be handled and cleaned up back in 2022. Well, now it's 2023, and now this thing might go on for years. Not exactly what legislators, people in the executive branch, people in the judicial especially, or the constituency out in Florida actually signed up for when this was actually brought to their attention, let's say. And to speak about that for a moment, yes, I would agree that this was a punitive measure for sure. And even though the pretext or the inflection point was very much like responding to what Disney actually said, their public statement regarding about their company mission to overturn some laws actually passed in Tallahassee there. Some of that kind of, oh, he's seeking revenge, all this kind of stuff. It's a little bit of a media fiction, right? These issues had been boiling over for quite some time, ever since actually the 1980s. And so if you know the history of this region, if you know the history of the friction between Tallahassee and the RCID, if you understand how let's say Disney has kind of muscled their way into certain carve-outs, into certain tax provisions, into certain legislation that omits them specifically, you know that at some point this was going to come to a head. In the way that it did, in the fashion that it is right now, I don't think any of us would actually, would have recommended this before all this, right?
Right.
We could have never seen, foreseen what is happening now actually taking place, but here we are, and we'll get into some of that in a moment. Actually, DeSantis's comments go into some of that history, which is really, really fascinating. So, without any further ado, let's hear from the governor himself, and then we'll examine some of this case right here. Again, there are things I have problems with. There are things that you have problems with.
Yeah.
There are things that I agree with, and so we'll go over those step by step and cut through the noise of maybe the media filter that they have on this kind of stuff. Right.
Absolutely.
So here we go.
And that was done, passed, signed. While that was happening, Disney did basically special deals to circumvent that whole process. And so they controlled the board. So it's basically like a legal fiction. They negotiated with themselves to give themselves the ability to maintain their self-governing status. Now, that's in direct defiance of the will of the people of Florida. I mean, we started on this course in 2022. This was an issue in the election, both for the legislature and for governor in this area. I was very clear where I stood. We were criticized for taking that position. We were criticized by the media, who always said self-government was bad for Disney. They always opposed it. Then, because I was the one that took it out, then they switched and they said that we should support Disney. But that's just their partisanship. But the reality is, this was something that was litigated. This is something that the voters understood. And not only did the legislature come back in ways that vindicated our position, we won big. And, we did better in Central Florida, Republicans done in a long time, including areas that have a lot of employees of Disney, like Osceola County. So the reality is, clearly that's the direction we were going to go. No more self-government. And they just didn't care. I mean, they thought that they could create some type of development agreements that would essentially render everything that we did null and void, and put them in control in perpetuity for this. Well, that's not going to work. That's not going to fly. Now, the agreements themselves have a plethora of legal infirmities that render them void anyways. And I think that the board, our state board that meets again on Wednesday, I think that they will find as such, and I fully expect them to take the board out of those agreements. However, even if that weren't the case, Chapter 163, Section 3241 of Florida statutes provides the legislature with the authority to revoke development agreements in this exact type of instance. And so I've worked with both leaders of the House and Senate. There is a bill that will be put out in the Florida legislature that will make sure that the agreements purported to be entered into by Disney are revoked, and the people's will is established and is upheld.
Real quick, now does this, okay, so when Disney out of it, right? So when
sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Oh, no worries. Leaving Disney completely out of it, and any other company or whatever that enters into a developer's agreement. Sorry, I can't talk right now. Developer's agreement. Let's say some other company goes into like a 30-year developer agreement. So what DeSantis is basically saying, though, is that like they can come in and undo that at any time, or any elected official that wants to do that, they can come in and undo those deals.
So this is interesting. 163 3241 says modification or revocation of a developer's agreement to comply with subsequently enacted state and federal law. So it says right here, if state or federal laws are enacted after the execution of a development agreement, which are applicable to and preclude the parties' compliance with the terms of a development agreement, such agreement shall be modified or revoked as is necessary to comply with the relevant state and federal laws. So that is the specific statute in which DeSantis is actually citing that talks about that. So in effect, okay, he's
saying that they're not what they signed is not in line with Florida law, so they have the right to go in there.
So what this is saying is that it's what Disney did, at least before it hits a judge, it's in line with Florida law right now. But even if it, like, let's say it was like ironclad, right? Like there's nothing anybody can do. It's everything is above board and completely consistent with current Florida statute. What this statute is saying right here is any developer agreement is subject to change with new laws that are added in, right? New laws that are voted on and passed. And specifically to that point, soon after this press conference, I believe on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, the Florida legislative body, I believe the House, passed this right here. Review of development agreements. An independent special district is precluded from complying with the terms of any development agreement or any other agreement for which development agreement serves in whole or part as consideration, executed within 3 months preceding the effective date of a law modifying the manner of selecting members of the governing body of the independent special district from election to appointment or from appointment to election. The newly elected or appointed governing body of the independent special district shall review within 4 months of taking office any development agreement and any other agreement for which the development agreement serves in whole or part as consideration, and after such review shall vote on whether to seek readoption of such agreement. This subsection applies to any development agreement that is in effect on or is executed after the effective date of this section. This subsection expires July 1st, 2028, unless reviewed and saved from repeal through reenactment by the legislature. So what this is saying right here, and this is why the word is very interesting, an independent special district. That's the RCID. That's what they're talking about right here. And what they're saying is that due to the unique circumstances, right? They've written in unique circumstances in which this applies to the actual governing board. They have the ability to basically veto any developer agreement that that was entered into before they even got there. And according to this section right here, well, this gives the legislature to pass this and the ability to do this.
That's fascinating. Now, do you think Disney? There's going to be a legal response to this, I would imagine. Is there any way they could fight this, or is this pretty ironclad itself?
I mean, judges are very, very. If I know my legal history correctly, judges are very, very apprehensive about the idea of overturning or challenging a law passed by the legislature itself, right? We hear about EOs that have been signed by presidents or governors or whatever.
And that's an executive order, just to be clear to the audience.
Correct, yes. Executive orders that are signed by the executive branch. That happens all the time. But judges are, even though there's supposed to be checks and balances and so forth in our, our government structure, they're very, very... let's say they don't like the idea of overturning something that's actually passed to the legislature, because the most of the power is vested to them for the legislature for a reason, right? And unless it violates the Constitution, I can see a judge saying, yeah, well, this is well within the powers of the legislative branch to pass something like this. And I mean, there's already existing laws on the books that allows them to do so. Fascinating.
Now, should we continue? We got more Ronnie Boy?
We do. We got some more Ronnie Boy. Yeah, we got to get into the monorail talk and prison talk.
Oh,
it's gonna be fun. It's gonna
that
be
whole
great.
monorail thing stresses me out, but it also gives me hope. But we'll get into that.
And that is something that's very important. And at the end of the day, we made the decision as a state, as a people, through the medium of our elections, that we would not have one corporation serving as its own government. That's not good government. And it's not something that we want to entertain in Florida any longer. And whatever rationale there was 60 years ago to do that, clearly now we're in a much different era as a state. We've got a lot of competitors that are treated differently, a lot of businesses and individuals treated differently, so we don't want to do that. So we want to make
real quick, pause real quick.
Yes.
No, and that's a fair argument to make. Look, we have competition. We got other players in this field, Universal, SeaWorld, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way this is being handled. Like I said before, if you come at it from the beginning, like this is a problem, we need to readdress it. And it wasn't, the catalyst wasn't like Disney says something I didn't like. I think more people would be on board. I think he's losing a little support with this war right now because it does feel so vindictive and so like, haha, we're going to get them. It's not like I'm doing this for the people. I'm really doing this because I look bad is basically the energy we're getting here. And I think a lot more people would be supportive of it if it just came from a more honest place, in my opinion.
Yes. That's the thing. He... I guess DeSantis was advised early on in this whole thing, just get rid of the special district entirely, and then reform a new district with, certain statutes that, let's say, limits their powers and privileges, and also kind of realigns, like, for example, let's say, like regulatory powers, right? It's like, well, should they be their own state inspector? Probably not. Should they have their own building codes? Maybe we can modify that, which you can make arguments for and against. That's completely fine. But some things like were a no-brainer, for example, like, okay, one of the reasons why they don't pay as many taxes as maybe some other places around Disney is because they're supposed to be self-sufficient. And this goes back to the whole reason for the Reedy Creek Improvement District in the first place, which was to create Progress City. As part of Progress City, they wanted essentially the privileges of a government in order to be self-sustaining, right? And the deal was, hey, we're going to be self-sustaining on our end, so that way we're not taking any city or county resources in exchange for less in taxes. And to be honest, that's not a bad idea. But I think there is some value in that. That's why they have their own fire department and so forth, right?
Right.
Well, the problem is part of that provision was for police, which they don't actually use, right? So it's like, okay, well, maybe those taxes should be adjusted. And there have been Orlando Sentinel articles around that, actually, which is very, very interesting. But moreover than that, there's been problems with fire, the RCD Fire Department, for a long, long time, and EMS services. How many times have we seen when an emergency actually breaks out at Walt Disney World, you don't just get the Reedy Creek Fire Department showing up, but you get some surrounding counties equipment showing up, right? You get stuff from Osceola County, you get stuff from Orange County and so forth, the surrounding cities, and it's like, wait a minute, hold on here. You're supposed to be self-sustaining. How is it that you're self-sufficient and yet you're calling in resources regularly? I think those can be adjusted, right? And under a new special district, just from jump, I think that would have reflected that. The way it's being handled here, and I think this is, this speaks to some of his points that he's going to mention here briefly here. The ability to like take land and develop it for your own, interests and stuff like that. Is that Disney's land? Should that be Disney's land? Some of these things have been set aside for ecological reasons and so forth. Obviously, the Everglades actually passes right through there. So for the environment of Central Florida itself, there are reasons why some of those things are undeveloped. Now you want to develop those things next to Disney's land right here. Like, that's kind of an issue. You want to get rid of maybe the Disney cone as it exists in Orlando. For people who don't know, a Disney cone actually exists in Anaheim. So the height requirements, right, as they flare out from the proximity of Disneyland itself, there are certain height restrictions in which developers can actually build over, so that you maintain the berm or the escapism in Disneyland itself, right?
Right.
Similar situation actually exists with the RCD in at Walt Disney World, but they want to like get rid of that. So it's like, can you, if you develop something, let's say they do a prison, they're not going to, but let's say they do one, right? Could that be tall enough to look into the Magic Kingdom? Well, nobody wants that, right? So it's all these kind of provisions where it's like, wait a minute, now you're going a little bit too far here.
Right. Like what other reason would they get rid of the Disney cone other than just being vindictive at that point? It's like we're trying to piss the mouse off almost, right? Yeah. The prison statement, yes, it was a joke, but I tell you, that prison statement was bad optics. I mean, people in general don't follow this stuff with the context and the level of depth that we do in the fandom. The soccer moms in Florida read headlines basically, and that's about as far as most people go. That's as far. So when they see a headline that DeSantis wants to build a state prison on Disney World property, they're thinking, wait a minute, I thought this guy was protecting my kids, and now he wants to build a state prison next to the place we all vacation. Bad optics. Joke or not, it was crappy. And I'm not even so sure it was a joke, to be quite honest with you. It was kind of like the mob boss saying, it's a pretty, it's a pretty little theme park you got over there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. Kind of energy, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if he's joking.
Yeah. It's a little bit of posturing, I would say. For sure. Whether or not he'll actually go through with it, I doubt it, but you do make a point, OG. And here's the thing about that prison comment, which we will get into, and we'll play it so that people kind of see it, right?
Because your own decision. I mean, we don't want that's a big thing here on OG55. We're not trying to feed narratives. We want everyone to make up their own mind. We have opinions, but you decide, where you're at with this stuff, right?
Right, exactly. So, look, we're gonna play it. We'll see the context right here, but it's like, why would you give? I mean, DeSantis is receiving more pressure than he ever has right now, and we'll get into that as well later on in this video here. But understanding that pressure actually exists in a way that it didn't exist, let's say pre-election 2022, it's like, why would you give your let's say political enemies or opponents, right? Why would you give them fodder like that? Because now it's going to be a headline on every single newspaper, magazine, trade, article, whatever. I was even looking at like a local news report on the RCID on like YouTube and whatever, and it was about something that was very RCID specific, right? It was actually following the meeting that took place on Wednesday that DeSantis alludes to here, which we'll also get into. At the very end, they talk about, DeSantis has talked about building a prison on there, that kind of bookend there, and so that's what sticks in people's minds. That was a really bad optics play, but we'll get into optics as well in just a moment. For now, we'll continue DeSantis's comments right here. I'm going to try to boost the audio here.
Go ahead.
It's not so low. So here we go. Let me see if this works.
That Disney lives under the same laws as everybody else. And some of that has already been underway. Once the state board took over, we began mobilizing state agencies to ensure that Disney's following the same rules. Building inspection, safety, all these other things that they were exempt from when everybody else has to follow. Now, if these are not good laws, then everyone should be exempt. You shouldn't just say one corporation should be exempt. So that's already been done. We're also working with the legislature. We expect the legislature to provide a legislative amendment, a provision. This monorail is exempt. They exempted the monorail from any safety standards or inspections, so they're going to go and make sure that the monorail is subject to oversight, just like everything else would be in the state of Florida.
Okay, real quick. Is the Orlando Icon thing that they had that I believe it was a recent death? Was that a state inspected attraction, DeSantis? Because that went not so great, sir.
Not so great. That is for sure. Now, to be fair, that was an illegal modification that was made after state inspection. But even in that instance, just because you do get state inspected doesn't prevent all incidents from actually happening. We've seen a number of incidents across the country for various amusement parks like Ohio, for example, and some of these other places that I think the Department of Agriculture actually, covers those in terms of state inspections for amusement attractions. And well, sometimes they aren't up to task as well. Interesting, because DeSantis will talk about later. He'll talk about inspections for attractions in the actual park. Well, it's interesting because the gentleman who heads up that attractions inspection for the state of Florida only actually covers, I believe, amusement parks that have less than 1,000 employees, which still doesn't cover SeaWorld or Universal or any of the Disney's competition. Again, like you said, OG, it is starting to look punitive. But on that end, though, I want to talk about some of the problems that might be alleviated by maybe additional regulation as it relates to the monorail itself. But go ahead, sir.
No. Well, and it's funny that he mentions no one company should be singled out like with special privileges, but then he's singling out one company and exempting Universal, SeaWorld, and every other. It's a little bit of double talk here. But now with the monorail, though, I have hope and I have a lot of fear. And the reason why I have hope is because the Walt Disney World monorails are in bad shape, and they've been in bad shape for a long time. Maybe if Disney is sort of forced into maintaining them better, we'll have a better product. That's great. I support that if that's how that ends up. My issue, though, is, and I made it very clear, I think from my opinions over time with this Reedy Creek thing, I don't trust Ron DeSantis, period. And is he going to make these arbitrary the bar that Disney has to meet so high, so ridiculously high that Disney can't even reach it, and then they end up having to shut down the monorail because he's being vindictive, So I don't want that. I don't know if he can even do that, to be fair, but it's a concern of mine that he's going to play games with these inspections. And I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that based on the history of what's going on here.
Which would be horribly ironic because Disney themselves had played games with the monorail, not specifically at Walt Disney World, but actually at Disneyland when they were trying to get Jack Rather to sell those Disneyland hotel rights to Disney back in the 1980s. They had threatened to increase the maintenance fee for the monorail station that was generously donated by Walt Disney to Jack Rather, a substantial amount in order to get those rights back. It's very, very interesting how this might be coming full forward here.
Full circle. So it can be done, and if he's got enough of a bug up his ass to do it, it's a possibility. And then Disney might just say, look, you know what? We don't want to deal with that. We're going to, instead of having 10 monorails or whatever they got now, maybe we'll just have 3 or 4. Because...
yes, and I would not like that. However, something has to be done with the monorail. What you're seeing right now was taken by BioReconstruct not too long ago, actually, of a monorail beam that is kind of nestled in one of the corners of Epcot. Interestingly enough, kind of hard to see, but well, those good photographers nowadays. They got those massive lenses now, and they can see just about anything. Those telescopic lenses, right? And well, this was called to light here, like, hey, what's going on? This is in really, really bad shape. And interestingly enough, after this photo goes viral, what does Disney do? Well, they patch it, right? Which is not the greatest kind of thing there, because it's like, okay, how long would you have let that gone on if somebody actually didn't bring it up or bring it to attention right here? That's a very concerning thing. Not exactly a reassuring thing.
It is. It's also, as fans, we don't know what's structural and what's cosmetic. I remember back in the 1994 earthquake here in California, and the Northridge earthquake, there was a lot of talk around that time period about like what's a cosmetic crack, what's a structural thing, right? When it came to the houses, they would come by and inspect them, and your house would be tagged one way or the other. You might have these big cracks in the wall, but it's not like a structural thing where your house is in any danger. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know, because I fucking don't. So, but I don't know if this means the monorail is not safe or not. I don't know if this chunk of cement alters the integrity of the beam. It very well might. I don't know. But as fans, we look at the stuff, and none of us are experts on that. So it's hard to even comment on it, because it's like, it's ugly, but is it unsafe? I just don't know.
I don't know, but we have had multiple incidents over for the monorails over the
Now,
years.
that's unsafe.
For example,
That is unsafe.
right. Yeah, so I've seen videos of this happening on more than one occasion, interestingly enough, and it's like, okay, well, that's obviously not good right there. And this isn't even the half of it. We've actually had instances where pieces of the monorail have actually broken off and have threatened the lives of guests below them.
Come on, Disney. Come on. There's no excuse for this. There's no excuse for this.
No excuse whatsoever. It is very, very frustrating when I see this, at all. It's just, it drives me nuts. And what's going on here is the monorails are just past their service life. They are, and they have been for a while. They really should have gone with an entirely new fleet in the 2010s, really, but they've just decided to kind of, duct tape and rubber, bandage, let's say, the monorails in order to get more life out of them, to forego a decision regarding, getting a new fleet. And honestly, that would cost well over $1 billion at this point. So it's not necessarily a cheap process. And I can understand from the company's position that's a big financial expense. That's maybe not necessarily worth incurring, but the monorail
it's a safety issue, though.
It's a safety issue.
If this drops on someone's head, you can really hurt someone or kill someone. I mean, this is really scary stuff here.
Absolutely.
Like, this is not like, when fans complain about like the color scheme on the buildings on Main Street or a window or a bench. This is real life stuff that you could really do some damage to somebody. What if a small child's not? I mean, this is insane right here.
It's ridiculous. It's horrible. The fact that the company hasn't actually done the due diligence in order to rectify these issues themselves.
Terrible.
I mean, I'm not necessarily all about government regulation myself, but in this particular case, I mean, what can I say? What can I ever respond with? This is not a good thing right here, and this needs to be addressed. And honestly, look, the monorail resort specifically, they get a massive upcharge because they are on the monorail line. Well, can't we take some of that money and invest back into one of the core parts of that product?
Yes,
it would make sense. So again, I'm sympathetic to some of these things. It's just like you said, OG, when you pass off powers to the state, it rarely occurs in the way that people want. So that's a story that's worth catching up on in the future. But we'll let him go on further.
Commissioner Simpson will talk a little bit more about what the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services do, but they have oversight over amusement park safety, generally speaking, except Disney's been carved out of that over the years. Well, now they're back in the game, so they're going to make sure that that's done. So it's just very important that we have uniform applicability of the laws, and to be able to circumvent this stuff, provides one company with a competitive advantage. We don't think that that's right. We also, so the board is going to meet on Wednesday, and we anticipate that they will be tackling a lot of other issues to ensure that our vision is upheld with respect to this district. One of the things they tried to do was put restrictive covenants on the land that the district owns. So if you look at this whole special district, Walt Disney Corporation obviously owns a lot of it, but the district owns other land. And, quite frankly, I wasn't even thinking about that land. This was not something that was really important one way or another. We just wanted them to live under the same rules, pay the debt, pay the taxes, all that stuff. Oh, but come to think of it, now people are like, well, what should we do with this land? And so, it's like, okay, people have said, maybe have another, maybe create a state park, maybe try to do more amusement parks. Someone even said, like, maybe you need another state prison. Who knows? I just think that the possibilities are endless, and so that is now going to be analyzed to see what would make the most sense, and that wasn't necessarily even on the radar.
It sounds like from discussions that the board has actually had in internal meetings and so forth, it sounds like affordable housing might be at the top of that list. Wasn't mentioned here, but it seems like it's going that direction. And based on Disney's response, it seems like they know it too. But we'll get into that as well. Go ahead, OG. You were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I just to reiterate the prison comment, all the stuff he said, well, some of it is reasonable stuff, like assuming he's going to be like honest about these inspections, holding Disney to the same safety standards as Universal. Okay, like what sane person wouldn't be on board with that, right?
Sure.
Assuming he's honest about that, assuming that these will be a uniform standard, and he's not going to play games with Disney standard and Universal standard, right?
Yeah.
But when he mentioned the prison thing, it was just like now all the headlines are that, he's so worried about the media and the bias in the media, and you just handed them fucking like everything they want.
Ammunition. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. 100% ill-advised for sure. Yep.
The board is also going to look at some of the infrastructure here, like the utilities, and then ask the question, it would be better to sell that utility from the district to maybe a private entity who can operate it more efficiently. Maybe the district would save some money on this and could put that towards paying down the bonds and the debts. So I know that'll be something there. One of the things I said from
this is quite interesting. I never necessarily thought about this, but actually selling the utilities off, that's an interesting idea. Never previously considered that before. OG, what do you think about all this? I mean, this is... That's quite a thing there.
It is. Does this put in danger some of the solar efforts that Disney World has kind of implemented over the years?
Some people say that might actually be a good thing due to the ecological damage that they've done. So it's an interesting idea, right? From my vantage point, as far as the infrastructure goes for Walt Disney World, to be honest, it's been deficient for a little while in the power regard or energy regard. And one of the reasons why I say that is, does anybody remember like when Rise of Resistance, for example, kept breaking down like more so than Disneyland's, and everybody was like, what is going on here? Part of that problem was actually the amount of clean power that was available to the RCID utilizing their existing grid. And unfortunately, it hadn't been added on to, at least substantially, for quite a while, up until Disney's Rise of Resistance attraction actually opens. Well, I mean, I have gotten reports from Imagineers themselves who have said, yeah, one of the biggest challenges of that attraction is getting enough clean power to power not only everything in the attraction that you see, but also the wireless vehicles that are wirelessly charged whenever they actually stop. So that has been an issue for Walt Disney World. I'm curious as to, like, can we get some of those issues addressed? I think maybe we can, but actually selling those utilities off, that's an interesting idea. And OG, I think it was Showcase of Wishes who actually brought to our attention that Disney has actually cooperated with outside companies for a little while here. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Yeah, which Showcase of Wishes, he has a great YouTube channel where he has a lot of like on ride video of like the Epcot stuff, Magic Kingdom, all that good stuff. He does a lot of great content over there, but he's a friend of the channel for sure. And that's exactly what he was saying. And he's a wealth of information in regards to Walt Disney World. So yeah. I'm sure of it. Absolutely.
To see the deficiencies in EMS, fire, maybe some inspections as there is to the monorail, utilities and so forth, it hurts the argument that Disney can be self-sufficient on their own.
They have been. I mean, no entity is going to be problem.
They need to be.
Yeah, but no entity is going to be problem free. Like I can go through the state and go, oh well, look, they didn't do that, they didn't do that. Look at the icon thing, they missed that. I mean, but even when they run this, it's not going to be perfect.
I agree, but if you're getting a tax break based on your self-sufficiency specifically, and you aren't necessarily self-sufficient in every aspect, right, and you are deficient in some aspects, shouldn't that need to be readdressed? Again, I'm sympathetic to the idea. Yeah. The way that DeSantis is going about it, I wouldn't necessarily do that. I mean, that would not be my chosen path here, and that has led to some political problems, which we'll get into in a moment. Yeah. Let's go on.
From the very beginning, that I know the board is interested in is we've got these first responders, but they really had no one that they could talk to about any type of grievance procedures or pay. So we think that you want to have pay increases for the first responders here in the district, and I think they can get that done.
And specifically what he's referring to actually is an old blog Mickey article about this, interestingly enough. Let me see if I can actually... Yeah, here we go. Blog Mickey themselves report Reedy Creek Fire Department using SUVs to respond to emergencies, rescue vehicles in disrepair, and so forth. We talked about how the RCAD has had to rely on some outside help, let's say, in order to get their tasks done right here, but this right here should not be happening. I think if there's one thing that people are kind of unified on when it comes to all these changes, and that is actually getting some of these guys a little bit more pay and a little bit more resources, which should have been done, but hadn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. There's not much left, so stay with us, guys.
Also, one of the things that was so frustrating for people over the last few years was, Disney clung to forcing these young kids to wear masks forever. And so I think that the district would be within its right to say that, anyone who's a patron of any business in this district has a right to do it mask-free. You should not be required to do a mask or any type of these medical authoritarian policies.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of an outdated thing. Like, even I'm here in California, and they don't require it out here even. I mean, so it's like, it's kind of okay, people agree with that, but like, do we need it necessarily anymore? Does it need to even be said?
Well, it's interesting because I thought about this for a little while. I think there are some who feel. I'll go ahead and mute that for a second. Don't get the feedback there. Having to bump up the audio here. Come on, DeSantis, get a better audio guy. First it was through one ear. Now it's low volume. Okay. Anyway, so I thought about this. There are some who believe that maybe it's best that that these provisions are put in place in order to prevent it from happening again. Right. It's an interesting idea. Right. But the second thing is I believe to this day, the Disney company, while they don't have an active vaccine mandate for employees in Disney, there is a vaccine mandate for new hires into the company, which is a really kind of interesting thing right there. No matter how you feel about it, not having that debate, not doing anything like that. Right. I guess the board, implemented an amendment that would prohibit both a vaccine and a mask mandate within district going forward. Does that actually include employees of Walt Disney World? I'm not sure. I don't know if it's just RCID employees versus Disney employees or anybody within the district or whatever. I'm not sure, but it's interesting.
What does that mean for future pandemics too? Like, okay, so what if there is a disease that goes around, God forbid, knock on wood, this never happens, but what if we have an outbreak of something far more deadly or far worse than the Rona?
Yeah.
So then do you have to come back and readdress this again and rewrite how does that work?
So under emergency use, right?
They can go in there.
Yeah. So that would kind of supersede through emergency powers, maybe outstanding orders regarding all of that, which is kind of why if people were concerned about liberties going away during that time, that's how that actually happened. And the judges in various courts all over the nation signed off on all of it. So just to give you some background there. But again, it's an interesting aspect because if let's say there is a pandemic in the future, right? If the people overwhelmingly support mandatory vaccination or mandatory masks and so forth in order to combat it, right? That will likely be reflected and addressed in the emergency provision. So
that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
So I think it would be something that the board could do to make sure that this district was really leaning in hard against human trafficking. There have been bills in the legislature, and I've signed legislation as governor. What would happen, though, is those bills, as they were going through the process, would sometimes get watered down, largely due to the lobbying heft of Disney, not wanting to have warnings in hotels and stuff. I think it's important that we lean in as hard against this as we can. And so I think they're going to do, we're actually doing more in the legislature. I know the legislature is working on some stuff, which hopefully I'll be able to sign. I really look forward to doing that. But we just have to make it very clear as a state, of course, but then here within this district, that really there's zero tolerance for human trafficking.
Well, yeah, and real quick, he's absolutely right. There should be zero tolerance, and so it's disgusting stuff going, with that. Disney not wanting big signs warning about that stuff in their hotels, I can't say that I blame them. I mean, that's kind of a heavy subject to put. You walk into the Grand Floridian and you see a big sign warning, yada yada. I don't want to keep saying the words because it's YouTube, but you know what I'm saying? I could see Disney's hesitant with the signage and stuff like that, but they should. DeSantis is absolutely right. They should be very aggressive in fighting that shit.
I would think so. Unfortunately, they haven't been. This is interesting. So this was written by the Orlando Sentinel back in 2018, interestingly enough, so not that far back. Disney asked to take public stand on
yada yada.
Person peddler law. Let's say that, right? Trafficking or person peddling survivors spoke tearfully of betrayal by Florida lawmakers Friday as bills that would have allowed the hotel industry to be sued for willfully ignoring the problem came to a puzzling halt this week, and victim advocates called on Disney to take a stand on the issue. It says this right here. Walt Disney Parks and Resorts has 2 lobbyists registered on the legislation, but neither has testified for or against it. In fact, no one has testified against the bills in either chamber of the legislature, but the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association has issued public statements saying its members would face, quote, unfounded lawsuits if the law passes. This says right here, a spokesperson, Aaron Hellkamp Power, person peddlers often rely on legitimate businesses to sustain their operations, and unfortunately hotels and lodging are one of the various venues that person peddlers use to exploit their victims. The Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association is deeply committed to working with stakeholders and lawmakers to ensure safety and security of our hotel employees and guests. This is an interesting topic because, well, I'll read it right here.
Sure.
What actually ended up happening to this bill here? This was written by the Orlando Sentinel a little bit later on. Disney won concessions on a bill to allow for person peddling victims to sue hotels. Last year, in the final hours of the session, the bill, which had seemed poised to pass, was suddenly dead in the water. Disney and the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association's lobbyists, quote, were opposing it behind the scenes and were well aware of that, said Richard Slauson, a Palm Beach attorney who sits on the board of Florida's Children First, which helped propose the measure. Their influence, he said, helped kill the bill. A version of the bill passed this year, though a key provision Disney opposed was stripped. The company did not respond to a question for comment on the measure. The key component was that the tourism-based hotels out of like Universal and Disney, for example, were not to be included in this new legislation.
Could we scroll down a little bit? Did Universal oppose that as well? It says here even before.
Yes.
So they opposed this like Disney did.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, Universal did actually oppose this bill as well. There was also some things. This is an interesting discussion right here as well. Disney's not the only one that has been able to, let's say, get what they want regarding Orlando, right? So I'll read this right here. Universal has raised its political profile as well. Even before deals for roads and corporate income tax breaks related to Epic Universe, which will be the company's third main gate when it opens in 4 years, Universal tapped into a little-known pot of public dollars through its joint venture with Loews Hotels. The Universal venture has claimed $17.1 million in tax credits over 20 years through Florida's, quote, Urban High Crime Area Jobs Tax Credit Program, which was designed to incentivize businesses to move into trouble areas. Now, that's interesting because where Universal is, I don't really necessarily consider that a high crime area, right? Well, it goes on. Orlando drew its high crime area to include Universal, allowing the company to draw public subsidies from the program despite the revitalization that has occurred there in the past 2 decades. Universal and Lowe's are the most avid users of the program, accounting for about half of all the tax credits ever awarded across the state.
Now, from our buddy Showcase, though, he did say, now, I mean, this isn't scientific by any means, but he did say it gets it's a little rough. It gets a little rough around there. But again, that's you're talking about a subjective, and it's anecdotal. So, I mean, I don't know the stats, but he said it can get a little bit,
One could argue that those tax credits help facilitate expansion for Universal's properties as they relate to that area of Orlando. But I mean, we know the theme park industry, they likely would have expanded anyway, even without those tax credits. Those tax credits were probably for, let's say, smaller companies and so forth to actually invest in those areas, not necessarily for big corporations, looking for a handout. So again, there is, what do you want to say? There is political gamesmanship by all sides. Don't just think Disney's the only one. Universal has its fair share of special privileges as well.
So what you're saying is,
man, I wouldn't trust that bitch. Nope.
So hey, it's my brand. I gotta do it. It's
All right. Let me play these comments a little bit more. I think it was only like a minute and a half. So let's just let's get it done.
Let's do it.
Another thing I think the board very well may look at is the how much is this property worth? I mean, basically, you had a situation where the company could appraise its own property. I mean, imagine if you could appraise your own property. Would you appraise it too high or too low? Of course, you're going to do it too lower. So
that is significant, right? So for the state, they do their own self-appraisal. Now, for federal, they don't. I believe they do have a federal appraiser actually go in there. But that again. There are some, let's say, taxes that maybe they should be paying for that they aren't now, and well, it seems like they will going forward here. But it's an interesting thing for sure.
In terms of the taxes, so they're going to be able to get that done, and I think get a more honest assessment about that. They also have the ability, when you're looking at paying these debts off, there's about close to $1 billion, I think, in unsecured debt, and we'd like to get that debt paid off as quickly as possible. Of course, it's not going to be paid by taxpayers outside of this district, so you got to figure out how you're going to do that. They can definitely look at the millage rate in terms of the millage that's being applied to property taxes, and taking whatever revenue you're getting and just accelerating that debt payment, because once that debt's extinguished, it makes it a lot easier to be able to deal with everything. And then finally, what role can they play in ensuring more workforce housing within these properties? I think that it's been a huge issue for so many people throughout the state of Florida. We just did a big bill for the state as a whole, but particularly here, there's been a lot of promises over the years about doing affordable housing for the workforce, and yet very little follow through, and there's various reasons for that, but I think we have an opportunity to look at that. So I think.
So there you go. That's about the extent of his comments right there. I'm going to go ahead and set my speaker settings accordingly right there. There you go. Sorry about the noise back there, the background noise.
No, you're good.
It was a very, very low audio. The affordable housing thing, we'll get into that more in a moment. Obviously, the company did respond to that directly.
They did.
But I think this takes us to the next portion of our kind of recap here with, let's see. Okay. Yeah. All right. So here we go. We'll get into this right here.
Here we go. Okay. Oh, man.
You gotta handle it in the order in which it happened.
Here we go.
Like I tweeted on Twitter, a new player has entered the game, right? He has scanned his magic band, and is now in the park. Here we
There
go.
it is.
So 45 decided to go ahead and comment on this. So all right, here we go. We'll do the impression here. DeSantis is being absolutely destroyed by Disney, okay? His original PR plan fizzled, so now he's going back with a new one in order to save face. I can't believe it. Disney's next move will be the announcement that no more money will be invested in Florida because of the governor. In fact, they could even announce a slow withdrawal or sale of certain properties or the whole thing. Watch. That would be a killer. In the meantime, this is all so unnecessary. A political stunt. Ron should work on the squatter mess. So there you go.
Interesting post by the former president on Truth Social. Here's the thing. He's kind of saying, like we started the show. I said you have to use what leverage you have, Disney, right? If you're going to want to win this war.
Correct.
He says it here. Disney's next move will be the announcement that no more money will be invested in Florida because of the governor. He's absolutely right on that. You pull back the investment and you cite the problem is Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
And now, okay, you have those headlines everywhere, right, in the media. And now the normies are reading these headlines going, oh, great. So now we're going to lose jobs because this guy got his feelings hurt. He's got some beef with the mouse. Now you're impacting my economy, my job, all this stuff. Got to remember, too, in Central Florida, a lot of people work for Disney, but even Disney adjacent businesses, hotels, what have you, Ubers that operate in and around that area benefit from Disney being there. So this impacts them very much so. So I agree with him on this. I think that you do announce a pullback. And here's the thing, Disney, you don't even really have to do anything. You just invested 2 e-tickets, Tron and Cosmic Rewind. You're in the middle of an Epcot redo. You can wait 3 years for Ronnie Boy to get termed out. You don't have to put much in. You've already invested very recently. The headline alone would destroy DeSantis, and it's all the leverage you need to kind of get him to the table. In my opinion, 45 is absolutely right.
I think 45 is right more than people necessarily give him credit for being. Because, look, on its face, sale of certain properties, the whole thing, right? He's saying that maybe they might up and leave completely.
That's not going to happen.
Look,
Come on.
45 knows that. If there's one thing he knows, it's real estate, right? He knows they're not leaving this, but it plays into this idea that they could, right? And that creates, I think, a little bit more friction, a little bit more pressure on Ron DeSantis to actually get this right.
Yes.
And it's a masterful stroke here for sure. And this is really kind of becoming an issue for, Ron DeSanctimonious. Okay, it's becoming a little bit of an issue because, well, now people are starting to kind of look at the playing field and go, who am I going to align myself with? What horse am I going to hitch my wagon to when it comes to the political playing field as it relates to 2024, 2028, and so forth, right? Specifically the politicians in Florida themselves. Well, it's interesting. So Daily Mail actually had something very interesting to say about all this. I guess Disney back in 2020 actually made a $10.5 million contribution to the America First PAC in the 2020 cycle, which benefited the former president directly. So that's a really interesting thing. Did not previously know about that, but the way they kind of make it out to be here is that that 45 was supportive of Disney's maneuver, or that he was siding with them. I didn't actually see that within the truth that 45 actually put out. I'm not seeing that. I know people are kind of casting it in that light.
Right.
No, folks, this is about a boxing match between somebody that maybe you might be neutral to and somebody that's your opponent. And saying that, the other guy is getting one over on the other guy. That's what that's really about.
Right. It's watching a debate and saying that person won. You don't have to agree with the person that won.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I don't think 45 agrees with Disney on a lot. So
Right.
I'm pretty sure of it. But he's looking at it from a spectator perspective going, well, they won though. And I don't know if here's the thing with this Reedy Creek stuff, right? It's an ongoing thing. So it's going to be like this ongoing, like Disney has the upper hand. Oh, now DeSantis does. Oh, now Disney does. It's going to be like that for a long time.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be a clear winner. There might not even be a clear winner ever at all, when this is all done. I mean, because it's going to go through the courts, right?
Right.
And it might be some stuff gets through the courts and benefits Disney, and some stuff gets through the courts and benefits DeSantis. So you might not even have a real clear-cut winner. So I think it's a little early to say like Disney won, but they did land a punch, and they landed a good one. I mean, he was seeing stars after what Disney did, and he's still kind of reeling from that move they made. Now, ultimately, he might win the war, but Disney landed a massive punch when they did that. It made them look really foolish on a national stage.
And it's interesting because 45 does talk about maybe the future moves going forward, as we've alluded to multiple times on this show. Even kind of a slow withdrawal, right? Now, I think when people see this, they think, oh, that they're going to be slowly moving out of the state completely. Don't think so. But a slowdown of investment, right? That $17 billion that Bob Iger suggests was earmarked for Walt Disney World in the next 10 years. I could very easily see Bob Iger saying, you know what? Can't do it. It's just a unfriendly situation for us regarding the CFTOD board, and also too, it's a lot of uncertainty. So we're gonna pull back on our investments just a little bit. So to 45's credit, watch that happen.
Well, yeah, and like I said earlier on, when we're saying this, and we're saying that Disney's strategy, it might be good for them to say there's a pullback. Again, I want to reiterate, because a lot of people misinterpreted me on Twitter. I'm not doing that because I think Disneyland Resort will benefit from that. I'm doing it because I feel like in order to win this battle against Ron DeSantis, Disney's going to have to utilize their leverage a little better. Like I said before, if you go into a restaurant and you get shit service, and then you speak to the manager and you complain for 20 minutes, and then you end that whole conversation with, but tomorrow I'm going to come back and spend even more. That manager has no incentive to do better. That man, you've given away all of your leverage. So by Disney saying, hey, we announced $17 billion, now that's off the table. You know what? That's off the table right now until this guy gets his act together. That puts a lot of pressure on Ron DeSantis. And I think 45 is sort of telegraphing to Iger and Disney what you should do in a way.
Right. And I mean, it's getting very contentious in that effort, right? Because, well, if you look at this headline right here, 45 now has backing of 7 of Florida's Republican members of Congress. Ex-president gains on DeSantis's home turf as the battle for 2024 endorsements heat up. What this article goes on to say is, I suppose people have been kind of, like I alluded to before, but they've been kind of choosing who they're actually going to politically align with when it comes to 2024 and beyond, and a lot of people are actually choosing 45. Now, the reason that's important for this story is because, well, you just heard DeSantis himself. He's going to rely on the legislature in order to pass certain things regarding the Disney situation out there in Florida. Well, if he loses enough support, he might not have a majority in the legislature in order to get some of those things approved. And this is a situation that's getting worse for him. For example, right here, today after careful consideration and positive meetings with Governor Ron DeSantis, this is Lance Gooden here, I guess he's a Texas congressman, I have decided to endorse the former president for 2024. I look forward to fighting alongside him to reclaim our country from well, you get the idea, right? So it's like, people are kind of they're leaving here, and the reasons as to why is really kind of interesting. But the snub from GOP lawmakers in his home state is particularly striking, as it's playing into the narrative that DeSantis is too aloof and inattentive to the interpersonal niceties of big league politics. And what this basically goes on to say is like, hey, DeSantis, he never contacted me. He never, reached out to me. I came down for an event at Hurricane Ian. I was told that, I wouldn't be part of it, so he shouldn't have even showed up in the first place. And he says 45, on the other hand, called him when he was in the ECU after suffering some injury and so forth. And so he endeared himself to him because of that kind of attentiveness.
And you know what? And this is the thing too, not to interrupt, but
sure,
relationships matter in both politics and business. And 45 understands that. What got Bob Chapek in the most hot water? Relationships with Hollywood, relationships with executives.
Yep.
That's his Achilles heel. And look where he ended up.
Things suddenly changed last week, Stubbe said, as 45 started rolling out his Florida congressional backers. Quote, for the first time ever, I hear from DeSantis' political person. He said, referring to aide Ryan Tyson, who reportedly contacted other Florida Republicans about their endorsements. For Stubbe, the outreach was too little, too late. And he continues to have sharp words for DeSantis, criticizing him for his robust political travel schedule amid a busy legislative session and just months after winning a new 4-year term. Quote, Floridians want him focused on Florida, he said, which is the job they elected him to do. This, again, he's starting to lose a little bit of political cachet. And we had kind of predicted this, OG.
Yeah.
We're long past what made DeSantis famous, right? Which was basically the pandemic. And as we get farther and farther away from that, the flaws, let's say, and the pimples start to show up a little bit. And maybe this wasn't this wasn't necessarily the horse that was promised initially, right? And that's the conclusion that a lot of GOP senators are actually coming to.
And people have short memories in general. And I don't mean this as a derogatory thing or anything, but just in general, people they kind of have a recency bias in general. Now, I know DeSantis and the Republicans will point to Governor Gavin Newsom in California and, look at the lockdowns. Look how long he shut down Disneyland. And look what he did over there, anti-business. But we're 3 years removed from that now. And people start to forget stuff. And the reality on the ground today is that Ron is going after a business in a big way, and Newsom is going after him for that. And right now, Newsom looks more pro-business. Whether that's true, the reality is the actual. Look, in politics, perception is reality.
It is.
So Newsom is painting DeSantis into that corner, like he's anti-business. And you can say 3 years ago, Newsom did this, Newsom did that. You know what? It doesn't really matter though, because today this guy is doing this stuff, and it's going to hurt him, and it has.
And it is. Deeply frustrated, Florida legislators worn out by DeSantis. The governor didn't wow D.C., and it's not great in Tallahassee either. Interestingly, DeSantis has had a very busy travel schedule going across multiple areas of the country, including D.C., because, he's, I believe, setting up for his presidential run. He actually just announced a tour going out of the country on a various tour of some countries that are both friendly and not friendly to the United States. It's looking like he's attempting to position himself for a 2024 presidential campaign. We'll see how successful he is, though. And as he does that, he loses support in the state itself. So here we go. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' ironclad grip of the Republican-controlled legislature, which, by the way, that's how some of these things are being facilitated regarding Disney, right? May be slipping amid growing frustration among GOP legislatures. Republican lawmakers are stalling a handful of his key remaining legislative priorities with just weeks left in the annual session. And what started out as whispers in private about unhappiness over the governor are starting to become louder, even though Republican lawmakers remain unwilling to speak out publicly against DeSantis because of his power and clout. One House Republican recently told a former legislature that he was ready to resign out of frustration over how the session was actually going. Part of the angst has been sparked by a grinding session where legislatures have pushed through bill after bill after bill and chewed up hours of contentious debate. That's considered integral to DeSantis' expected presidential campaign. DeSantis' announcement this week that he wanted legislatures to take aim again at Disney has irritated conservative Republicans loath to target private businesses. And speaking about that specifically, Disney tells its lobbyists to step up the fight against DeSantis and his allies in Florida. I have a couple of words for Disney. You are not going to win this fight. This governor will. An ally to the governor said on Wednesday. Go ahead, OG.
Here's the thing with this. This terrifies Ron DeSantis. That Disney is working and trying to work with these lobbyists. Because remember, what was in the press release about the bill that got him all rattled? The fact that Disney said they were going to work to repeal the bill. How does Disney work to repeal the bill? This is how they do it.
Correct.
This freaks him out. I can guarantee you he does not like this news.
Disney is preparing to take its fight with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his GOP allies in the state legislature to the next level, according to people familiar with the matter. With just weeks until Florida's legislative session ends, Disney is pushing lobbyists to step up their efforts to influence the Republican-controlled state legislature and to target land use-related bills that could hurt the company, among other measures, that the people who declined to be named in order to speak freely about the issues. So, again, it's starting to really kind of heat up for the dear old governor in Florida right there. How long will he have enough political cachet to do what he's actually doing in Florida? That's an open question right now. People are becoming very, well, as the Political article put it, frustrated with the governor's recent actions. Yeah.
Well, and then you have people like 45, former president, coming out very vocally against him. And when you have that, and you have Chris Christie, and look, I get it. Chris Christie has his own issues. I believe he's a contributor to ABC News. So there's already a thing there. Who owns it? ABC.
Right. But to be fair, though, this would be a person who you would think would be on DeSantis' side specifically because he has become more of an establishment figure, leaving the populist wing behind. Right. Chris Christie, he even said he was not a real conservative, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, that's a really kind of interesting change of tone right there from a establishment conservative Republican like that.
Right, and once you have these politicians, these Republicans coming out, like it said in the article, that a lot of these guys and gals are hesitant to come out against DeSantis because of his power, his clout.
Sure,
but once you start to have a few of them come out, then it's like, oh, the water's warm. Come on in, right? You start to. If no one wants to be the first one to do it, but once you get the first and second person out there, it starts to escalate. Again, goes back to Bobby Chapek.
Apologize for not being the ally that you needed me to be.
Exactly, right.
Once the executives were coming out, like Victoria Alonso and others, against Chapek and his moves, you saw more and more confidence in that, and it snowballed. So once the voices start rolling. He can't really stop it, and he's getting to that point very soon.
And I think Disney, through its media allies, want the perception to be out there that his power is waning. And to be fair, it actually might be. Those endorsements, to have 7 endorsements from Florida Congressman, 245 instead of DeSantis, that's
in his state.
Really interesting. In his state. And recent polling actually suggests, OG, that 45 is winning every single state against DeSantis. I think Georgia and Florida are the closest within, 20 to 10 points, right? But there are a plus 30-point gaps, and that kind of discrepancy, not maybe to that extent, but that exists in Florida too. 45 is winning Florida.
Well, and this is the thing that's, and I don't know the answer to this, but I think it's a fair question to pose, right? In Florida, the only thing he's focused on is this war on Disney. So are these falling numbers and 45's rise in Florida a sign to Ron that maybe this Disney thing is hurting him? Or maybe it's unrelated? And again, I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a fair question to pose here.
I think many of DeSantis's recent actions are getting Republicans specifically, I guess, MAGA Republicans, if you want to use a term there, to look at DeSantis differently. It's interesting what, let's say, foundational members of that community have been saying about DeSantis as of very, very recently. People are souring. And so I understand DeSantis's, maybe his path forward is through and not around, right, when it comes to Disney. But for his sake, better handle this quickly. And by all appearances, it doesn't seem like this is going to be resolved that quickly.
Not anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly, right? Going to the first meeting that DeSantis alluded to himself on Wednesday. Well, hey, Blog Mickey was there to cover it all. I wanted to go ahead and play just a few clips from his video, but I implore
MickeyViews,
everybody.
by the way. MickeyViews.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, Blog Mickey was there too, Left Place was there too, but yes, MickeyViews. I really, really do apologize. Braden, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. Everybody's got everybody, all the Disney references in their names. I get them mixed up myself.
No, it's all good.
MickeyViews, I think, people, they have differences with everybody. I get it. I understand. But in terms of the content that is produced, you got to include MickeyViews at the top of that list.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's pretty. I think he's a very good content creator in that regard. And I would implore anybody to actually view this video in its entirety. We'll play a few clips though.
MickeyViews is right up our alley here on OG55 because here on the channel, like we do a lot of the similar kind of journalistic commentary kind of stuff that MickeyViews does.
Yeah.
The deep dives into this stuff. You don't see MickeyViews going into the park doing the churro thing, and I'm not disparaging that at all. There's fantastic content creators out there that do like the food reviews and things like that. Really cool stuff, but we don't really do that here on this channel, and MickeyViews doesn't either. So it's like, just for us personally, we gravitate towards this guy's content because it's like, man, this is our shit. We love it. you know?
Exactly. No. I agree. I think his commentary is pretty good, all things considering, right here. But hey, I'll give credit where credit's due. To actually go down there and actually see it in person, bring the camera and all that.
Absolutely.
Well, we gotta showcase that on OG55 a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll play some clips. Here we
Very special MickeyViews report for you today. I'm here on location at Reedy Creek. We have the next convening of the new state-appointed board meeting today. It is a public meeting, so let's head in there and see what they have to say.
So let's first take a step back into time. In 1967, the tax bases in Orange and Osceola counties were rather insignificant.
Can we pause it real quick?
Sure.
This guy needs a new haircut. I'm sorry.
I
I just had to talk shit, but yeah, he needs it.
Everybody has been saying that. I don't necessarily disagree.
The Creek Improvement Act seemed like a decent deal. In exchange for special privileges, Disney would construct its kingdom to draw tourists, spark industry, generate jobs and revenue. But nobody, except other than perhaps Disney, believed that the act would live in perpetuity. Lo and behold, the increasingly powerful corporation was able to fortify its sweetheart deal through powerful lobbying and clever marketing for decades. Above all, because nobody in Tallahassee was willing to shine a light on this arrangement. Then Governor Ron DeSantis courageously, and I repeat, courageously called it out for betraying not only fair market competition, but also the citizens of Florida. As such, it is especially shameful that Disney decided to take adversarial actions against the district even before this board was constituted.
He says something
Before we
very
learned
interesting.
about Disney's illegal contracts, created at the 11th hour, our board was genuinely looking forward to working with Disney in a productive and collaborative manner to improve the functioning of the district.
That's an interesting statement right there. What he's saying is that we were looking forward to working with Disney on district issues. look, it's hard to suss out truth from falsities and so forth, right?
And it's hard to buy that. It's hard to buy that, not to interrupt, but it's hard to buy that when DeSantis, before this whole drama started, this Hail Mary from Disney, was telling the press to buckle up. It was clear DeSantis was revving for a fight regardless.
For sure. But any chance of that happening is now dead. And that's one of the more upsetting things about this whole thing. But we'll go ahead. Again, there are arguments for and against.
Instead, the corporation decided that compromise was out of the question. It was Disney's way or the highway. This is why we were forced to hire litigation counsel, and you will hear more about that in this meeting. Regardless of your politics, nobody should favor outdated legislation that elevates a corporation above the public good.
Okay. I want to go ahead and skip to the part that I think that was, that everybody was like, whoa, didn't know this existed here. So here we go. This section of the video.
I just have one comment.
Sure, go ahead.
Butter emails.
Yeah. Here we go.
Stuff that we heard at the previous meeting, which we covered in detail several weeks ago. There's also a lot of unrelated procedural stuff and things unrelated to this current Reedy Creek battle. But there was one fiery report in there which we got, which I'm going to be straight up with you, doesn't look too great for Disney. Disney's legal team, they've been getting some wins with the state having been caught asleep at the wheel. They were not aware of this developers agreement that Disney got through. They presented it at multiple public meetings. Disney's legal team might be good, but the streak might be coming to an end here based on what we just got. And I have a lot of folks on Twitter right now saying, Braden, this totally doesn't matter. I don't know. That'll be for you to judge. You're about to see David H. Thompson, who is a DC trial attorney, a lawyer that presents arguments to the Supreme Court, reveal internal emails between Disney and the old Reedy Creek, claiming to show how Disney's legal team drafted the developers agreement, giving themselves governmental power, and then suggesting a switch of the attorney listed at the top of the document from the Disney lawyer to the district's attorney, and also how Disney's lawyers were modifying the verbiage to be used by the supposedly independent Reedy Creek Board of Supervisors at their own public meetings. Does that sound very independent to you? Not to me. That said, folks on Twitter, they've been telling me, hey, Braden, this is very normal. And, I've been the one telling you guys for weeks, I doubted that DeSantis would be able to prove that this developers agreement is self-dealing, because even though we know that Disney does control Reedy Creek to a large extent, and this contract kind of is self-dealing, no company wants to be their own government on paper. It opens you up to all sorts of liability issues and legal issues. Disney is very careful to keep a degree of separation between Reedy Creek and themselves. So proving in a court of law that there's self-dealing going on here seemed like a bit of a stretch, and if the state can't prove that, then this contract is protected by the Constitution. Florida would have to run it all the way up to the Supreme Court in that event. But if there is a preponderance of evidence that you are acting as your own government, you can't sign contracts with yourself. So that would void everything. The prior contracts between Disney and the Disney-controlled Reedy Creek, all of it would no longer be valid. I'm no lawyer. These are not my assertions I'm making here. I am giving you guys a taste of what the new board's counsel just presented. Here are the important bits.
Okay, yeah. Well, just stop it there for a second.
Yeah.
I thought they didn't have any emails regarding RCID developer agreements or contracts. Isn't that really interesting?
Well,
apparently they do.
They didn't have any. I think they were looking for stuff that was, what's the word?
Frustrating the process.
Yeah, yeah, or like illegal, or like well, and we'll get into the email itself. Should we dive into it now?
Yeah, well, let's dive into it, and we'll save all the commentary for afterwards.
Sure, let's do it.
Chairman, on February 8th of this year, Disney and the outgoing supervisors of this district engaged in a blatant effort to attempt to subvert the will of the people of Florida in a backroom deal. For over 50 years, Disney had enjoyed a sweetheart deal that exempted it from the type of government regulation that every other business in the state complies with. The Florida legislature and Governor DeSantis sought to end that special treatment. They were committed to having Disney treated the same as all other businesses in the state. Disney responded by engaging in an illegal and indeed unconstitutional effort to extend the life of its sweetheart deal. But Disney's efforts are riddled with illegality, and they will not withstand judicial scrutiny. Procedurally, Disney and the prior board failed to adhere to the state sunshine laws. Specifically, they failed to mail notice to the other property owners in the district.
Okay, so what he is referring to there, I have a screenshot of that. There we go. Is this section right here in Florida law? So this is 163.3225, which says here, public hearings. Before entering into, amending, or revoking a development agreement, a local government shall conduct at least 2 public hearings. At the option of the governing body, one of the public hearings may be held by the local planning agency. Notice of intent to consider a development agreement shall be advertised approximately 7 days before each public hearing in a newspaper of general circulation and readership in the county where the local government is located. Notice of intent to consider a development agreement shall also be mailed to all affected property owners before the first public hearing. The day, time, and place at which the second public hearing will be held shall be announced at the first public hearing. The notice shall specify the location of the land subject to the development agreement, the development uses proposed on the property, the proposed population densities, and the proposed building intensities and height, and shall specify a place where a copy of the proposed agreement can be obtained. So that is what this attorney is saying is at issue regarding the sunshine laws that Florida has in its statutes.
To counter, I'm going to actually, because I think this gentleman, we both follow this gentleman. I think he's been on top of this, and I think he brings up an interesting point, and I kind of want to see what you think about it, Dre, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure, go ahead.
So CBC Travels here says,
okay.
Who exactly do you think are the affected property owners other than Disney and the old board, both of which were party to the agreement and worked on the agenda together? Who exactly were they supposed to mail? The residents are all renters from Disney, the property owner. So who else owns any of this property?
So interestingly, there are residents of the district. Do those residents qualify as actual property owners, specifically the double wides north of Magic Kingdom, for example, and who actually resides there? I believe that land is kind of in a leasing arrangement in which they have to sell that land back to Disney after a certain standpoint. Yeah. One might be able to argue that they were property owners at that time. From what I understand also too, I believe the Golden Oak properties are also property owners, if that is correct. I don't know did they rent those houses or no.
I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
So the idea is, okay, well, if Disney's a party to this and Disney's the only property owner, let's say, of the district, right? Are they necessarily mandated to mail themselves a notice that this hearing is going to take place 7 days in advance, right? It's an interesting argument from a legal basis. From my standpoint, I don't think that's going to be sufficient in order to render an agreement null and void, because it's kind of this letter of the law versus spirit of the law, right? This is what judges decide all the time. The letter of the law says you have to mail these things out. But the spirit of the law is, well, yes, you're mailing these things out because you're attempting to notify the people of these developer agreements. Well, there is no obligation to notify because, right, they were party to it. So
they were emailing each other.
Well, then we'll get into that for sure. Jonathan Turnley, I will kind of bring this to light here. Jonathan Turnley, an attorney who's been following this, I guess, closely. He contends that they didn't actually fulfill their obligation and that this might be rendered null and void. Let me see if I can actually find the subsection here. Let's see. Hang on here. Okay, the Declaration of Restricted Covenants gives Disney total control over development and even bans the new board from using Disney's name or the names of any of its fictional characters. Fanciful characters, sorry. It added the royalty clause, the royal clause. Well, it says right here, first and foremost, under Florida subsection 163.3225, which is what I just read to you earlier, a board cannot order such changes without giving a 7-day public notice and other conditions. You are not allowed to jump scare like Space Mountain. You must give notice on your intended measures. Also, too, and I thought about this, and I honestly don't know the question. Does affected property owners include people outside the district? Now, this might be a weird question to ask, but let's say, for example, the board does want to get rid of the provision says maximum density, maximum height, right? Or
Right.
maximum intensity is what they say. Well, if you live by the district, that will affect you. If you have,
Right.
let's say, a high rise right next to you, right?
That affects you.
Are they affected property owners? Because if then they are affected property owners, well, that changes some things. But I really don't know. If somebody could let me know in the comments whether that provision would actually apply to them, I would very much like to know that answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and real quick, I do want to also say with Jonathan Turley, and this is from somebody I follow on Twitter. He was in the Florida legislature. I'm just putting it out there because I think it's worth mentioning.
Sure.
Apparently, okay, so this is Juan Carlos. He says Turley was hired by DeSantis folks to say all of this. I guess the reason he said the reason I know this is because I was a Republican legislator in Florida when we hired him on a cultural issue in 2004. Now he goes on to kind of go after Turley, calling him a hack and stuff. And I'm not going to get into the name calling, but I just found that interesting because he actually was part of the Turley stuff in 2004.
I suppose so. Very, very interesting. We'll see. It's interesting thing that I could have guessed that he was hired on by DeSantis to actually put this out there. He had an article in the New York Post, for example, talking about this and so forth. They definitely are attempting to combat some of the media against DeSantis with some other information of their own. We'll see who actually wins out in the end.
The obligation to make such a mailing is crystal clear under the law of Florida, and Disney's failure dooms their entire effort to evade the will of the people of Florida. And there's a second procedural flaw in Disney's efforts. Under Florida law, a development agreement of this type can be entered into only if the district has put in place procedures to adopt such an agreement. And the Reedy Creek Improvement District neglected to do so.
Again, another procedural argument.
There are no such procedures in this district, and these purported contracts are therefore null and void for that reason alone. Substantively, the agreements are unconstitutional, and I'd like to show a series of slides that we've unearthed in our investigation. These are internal emails that we have discovered.
Okay, so we'll read these briefly here. Chapter 163, Development Agreement. So this was a subject of talking about the development agreement itself. This is from John F. McGowan at Disney. I wonder how many people have emailed him, actually. That's an interesting idea,
I know.
right?
Oh, yeah, that's true. They kind of doxed the poor guy.
Doxed him, right? So, okay, lots in the inbox there. So this is somebody from Disney emailing somebody from the district itself. And says, thanks, Ed. My name is currently at the top of the document as the drafter, and I am comfortable having my name on it, but from an optics perspective, that is not ideal, and it would be better to have a non-Disney employee be the drafter. The Vogel team do not want to put their name on it, unfortunately, because they are a Tallahassee firm, and they do work for the governor, unfortunately. Would you be willing to put your name on it as the drafter? Any other thoughts? That doesn't look good. It might not be illicit, right? But or illegal, right? But doesn't look good. And so a lot of people were saying, well, this means nothing. This is total farce or whatever. Again, there had been this level of separation, this level of autonomy between these two bodies, because if there were any connection between these in an official capacity or a legal capacity, that could present some issues. So imagine if you were making this case to a judge, and let's say this was not enough, right? That this was insufficient for their case. Well, you could also make the motion for a grant of discovery based on this. See, that's the thing. It's like, hey, we think there's reason to believe that there's more self-dealing here than just this document right here. This purports to suggest that. We want a motion for discovery to be granted in order for us to look into Disney's records specifically regarding all of this. That's where this gets, I think, the most complex here right at the gate.
It's interesting. Yeah, a lot of people are focusing on the optics perspective. Now, the gentleman that was just speaking said Disney made a backroom deal, but then we have an email here saying they're worried about optics. So it clearly wasn't that backroom because they're worried about the public optics. Just, this guy understood the scrutiny, the public scrutiny this was going to have because Disney's on it. It's a Disney thing. This was clear, and there was a public hearing on this development deal, all that stuff. So it wasn't a backroom deal. I mean, now the optics thing could be playing to that public scrutiny. So like a lot of people are saying, well, they're worried about optics because therefore now they must be doing something shady. I push back on that. Now they could be, I don't know, but I think that we're being worried about optics in a thing that is going to get a ton of media coverage.
Sure.
Seems kind of normal to me. I mean, you're going to want to worry about the optics and dot all your I's and cross all your T's with something like this. You don't want bad optics. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something nefarious going on, in my opinion.
I don't know about that. I really do have to be honest. The contention has always been that the RCID and Disney, while everybody knew they were basically one and the same, that they weren't on paper or in official capacity, especially as it related to official proceedings that would take place within the confines of the RCID. And clearly, that's no longer the case. So, again, I would argue that even though maybe this doesn't necessarily reflect the illicit conduct as put forward by this lawyer, it does definitely, I think, for a judge looking to decide on this case, grant a motion for discovery to see if there's any other dealings between the two entities.
Now, would it be fair to say, and like Braden, I'm not a lawyer. I like how he says that in there. It's funny.
I'm not a lawyer either. So.
No, yeah. Well, you're the lawyer of all lawyers, right? Remember?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, man, that title comes back again to haunt me. Okay, go ahead.
No, just kidding. No, none of us here are lawyers, but we're fans, and we're trying to research the stuff in an intelligent way and trying our best.
Oh, yeah,
but we're absolutely trying our best with this stuff. But is the fact that they're kind of transferring the power, right? Like Reedy Creek is giving this to Disney now. It's an arrangement between these two entities, right?
Mm.
Is it unreasonable to assume that there would be emails between two parties trying to make an arrangement, some sort of transfer of power? Wouldn't it be assumed that, like, I'm sure, I mean, you would have emails between Bob Iger and Lucasfilm when he was trying to acquire that. Wouldn't you have this kind of thing? I mean, I don't know. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but in other development deals, is this kind of thing normal or not? And I don't know the answer to that. And I would think it would be if you're trying to do the transfer. You know what I'm saying? Try to okay, we're going to transfer this over to Disney now. You would have to have some kind of correspondence with these two parties.
Indeed.
No?
Well, indeed, yeah, but this suggests that those parties are one and the same. And so that's kind of the big distinction here. And in prior developer agreements, of course, there would be correspondence between two parties. That's for sure.
Right.
But this suggests that these are not two distinct parties, that these are these parties are interchangeable, right? And they never have been on a legal or an official capacity. And that's what's most at issue right here. It opens them up to certain liabilities and other things that could maybe render this whole thing void. Now, I'm not sure if it actually is going to, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is enough just by itself. Doesn't look good though. I think that's what I'll say. It doesn't look good, and for a judge looking to decide whether or not to go forward with the case at all, or looking to render a judgment which way or the other, I think this is certainly grounds that could be granted a motion for discovery, and that's precisely what Disney does not want. And remember, they said those records don't exist. Well, maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll let this play out a little bit. We only have a little bit of it left, and we got to wrap the show up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is ironic, though, too, how John says he's concerned about the optics perspective, and his email about the optics perspective was the worst optics in the whole thing.
Very ironic. Very ironic.
Since we've been retained. And the first one shows that Disney's effort to obscure that it drafted the development agreement by having the district's lawyer, who, as I just mentioned, works for Disney too, put his name on the drafter. You can see the subject. It says developer agreement, chapter 163. This email at the bottom is from John McGowan, and he says he's the chief counsel in the legal department of Walt Disney World. And we can see that he says in the body of it, my name is currently at the top of the document, that's the development agreement, as the drafter, and I'm comfortable having my name on it. But from an optics perspective, that is not ideal. And it would be better to have a non-Disney employee be the drafter. So we see Disney doing the drafting and then trying to cover it up right away. And if we look at the next slide, we'll see the same was true of the restricted covenants. Here we can see that originally it says that it's John McGowan, that's the in-house Disney lawyer we just saw, it was listed as prepared by and returned to, and then that struck out, and then they put in the district's lawyer instead, and you can see that in the red line. If we look at the next slide, we can see that the Disney in-house lawyer also edited the development agreement agenda for the district's board meeting. We can see the subject line forward agenda for January 25, 2023.
That's significant because those are supposed to be RCID roles to modify an agenda that they're voting on. So again, showing a little bit more.
And we can see that this is from John McGowan, the in-house Disney lawyer. And we can see, he says in the first line, I would also suggest modifying the agenda item as follows. So Disney's lawyer is literally writing the agenda for the board meeting. If we look at the next email, we can see that the same Disney in-house lawyer edits the talking points for the administrator. And so here again, Disney is pulling the strings, and all of that is procedurally highly irregular.
So yeah. He's making his case as if he was talking to a jury, which he's an attorney, so I guess that's how.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's very, very interesting. I'm very curious to see how that pans out, how that all. Yeah, like you said, it's the board's attorney, so it's going to make Disney look like the bad guy. I'm sure when we hear Disney's attorney on this, if we ever do, then it's going to be the opposite, and they broke all the rules, and Disney was above board. It's fascinating, but there's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo in here, and it's gonna be interesting. I think we're gonna have a lot of great shows going forward in regards to this, because I'll be very curious how a lot of these judges, where they land on this stuff. We could speculate, but where are they gonna land? I'm very, very curious.
Agreed. And I'll just go ahead and end by saying the board, after this conclusion of this presentation right here, they did take up proposals relating to the Supreme Amendment that Blog Mickey had talked about before. The EMS and fire for wages with the union, they did take up that proposal. The end of the vaccine and mask mandates, they took up that one. And they even suggested that maybe the height restrictions that were put in place by Disney are not within the bounds of the powers of the RCID. So they did talk about that, which, that has not great consequences for the district going forward if that is a measure that is passed by this board. So we'll see. We'll be watching that one very, very closely. Yeah. People can imagine right here. But they also took up a proposal on affordable housing, and well, so did Disney themselves. Right after this actual meeting took place, they announced that their affordable housing project that they had announced right around around the time that the RCID was maybe in jeopardy back in 2022. Well, they said that they're going to be breaking ground in it very, very shortly. 1,400 units total, 100 higher than we initially anticipated, and will be completed by 2026. So yeah, so it's a back and forth right here. It's a game of chess being played out here, and like we said, you know, DeSantis. I mean, I don't want to say he's playing checkers, but he better get going real quick here because his time is running short.
Well, the strategy Disney's doing is it's a two-pronged strategy. It's an optics game. He's trying to appeal to the public with the affordable housing, right? That's a great example of that. And the other prong of the tactic is the lobbyist thing, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So he's working in and out. He's working the PR and he's doing the inside baseball stuff.
Correct.
And so, look, and this is the thing. I think that when Bob Iger took over, DeSantis kind of kept the we're working against Chapek mindset. Chapek was a novice in this. Chapek was horrible. This was Chapek's Achilles heel was this kind of stuff, PR, all this stuff. True. It's not Bob Iger's Achilles heel, though. No. Bob Iger is a master at this stuff. And you're right. I think DeSantis is going to have to really step it up because the PR, the public perception is a big factor in this. You can't ignore that. You make the prison comment, you know, it's
exactly. And like you said, this isn't Chapek. This is Bob Iger, who is a master at the PR game. And honestly, I think they will ultimately win the PR game. The question is the substantive game. The changes that could be enacted one way or another and could be decided by a judge or maybe even the legislature themselves and so forth. Where is that going to go? I think that is the more immediate question. But I think the PR game, Bob ain't going to lose that. I wouldn't bet against him in that regard. And will that be enough to actually change public support surrounding this issue? Maybe in to DeSantis's to detriment. And if that is the case, well, then that could affect a lot of his legislative agenda. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see on all of this. It's a really, really fascinating thing right here. Sorry it took so long, guys. I do apologize. I intended to, for us to catch up on this story, maybe 45 minutes or so, but then just stuff kept happening. So hopefully this was a comprehensive update on this specific issue.
No, and that's why, and first of all, Dre, I just want to give a lot of people that watch our show don't understand like what goes into these shows. And Dre is the unsung hero in all of this with the research he does, the amount of work he puts into it. And I cannot be more thankful more honored and humbled that you're on with me doing this stuff. And so thankful that you put in the work. So again, thanks to Dre for putting it all together. And honestly, I don't know anyone doing two hour videos on Reedy Creek but us. So.
No. And, we try to be, we go into these shows and I go into it with the mindset of like, what would I want to listen to? Right. My time is limited. I want kind of a one-stop shop for all this kind of stuff. Right. And hopefully I am providing that, as a co-host to you, good sir, and to our fine viewers out there, with the coverage that we have. So I do appreciate, OG, allowing me to pontificate in all of these things and to hopefully provide coverage for your viewers that they might appreciate. So thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And down below, everybody comment down below with what you think of all this stuff. There's it's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of legalese and all that's over a lot of people's heads. But based on what we know, what do you think? What do you think about the PR game? What do you think about everything going on here? Because there is just so much. It's a meaty topic, and it's here with us for a very long time. This thing is not going away anytime soon.
Oh no, unfortunately it is not. But hopefully it won't be as I don't know, dense in terms of the news cycle as it has been. This has been a lot over these last few days. I believe the board has their next meeting next week, which they'll be deciding on some of their agenda issues there. Again, it'll be something in which we catch up on. Hopefully, it won't take 2 hours to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you, Dre, for coming on. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for watching. Comment down below. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.